Hello. We want to round off this little series of talks by putting it all together in a sense, but really focusing on the thing that's biggest for us, and we believe also has become what we're terming the elephant in the room. And I don't think we're the only ones to talk about it like this. We know from a 2017 study that there are around 11 million deaths globally due to unhealthy diet. And we now know, thanks to the coronavirus, that people with certain lifestyle conditions are the underlying causes we keep hearing about that are contributing to a very difficult time and ultimately death from this disease, this virus. And we really want to do something to try and inspire people to minimize those effects and to maybe turn things around a little bit. So this is really what all this is about, and to have a look at why it is that we're in a bit of a mess. I said 11 million deaths globally. We know in Britain that we are the sick man of Europe. And it's not as if Europe's in a particularly robust state itself. And for us to be worse than that is pretty miserable. And it would be really great if we could do something about it, alleviate some of the misery, and actually contribute to not just reducing symptoms and being disease free. That's great, it's wonderful, but actually being really well. We believe that's possible, and that's what we're passionate about. So one of the things that we want to start with is to have a quick look at why it is that we're not already doing this. We've got a historical problem of a few decades of really doing food fairly badly. And why is that? Why can we not get our education about food from the obvious places? And maybe the very first one is parents and schools. You would imagine that would be the ideal place to get your information. These are people, typically, on the whole, who really do care. Why are they not passing on the right information? And there are two very good reasons. They've often been born into the same food environment, albeit a few decades earlier, as the children that they're in charge of. And they don't have the education. They simply don't know. So they do have your best interests at heart very often, but simply don't know what to do. We have become so completely disconnected from the food that best suits our biology. So that's one reason. Can you give us another, Graham?
Yes, and just actually going back to what Annette was saying about that parents, schools, that kind of those influences. I think that this also, it probably goes back to the 1950s, certainly just after the war, when it was really when food started to change, and the kind of the whole issue of convenience food and refined foods came along, and I think that's where things probably started to go wrong. But coming back to the other factors that influence this lack of education, this lack of movement on this is we can't rely on our government either. Government it sometimes makes the right noises, but ultimately there's no real kind of hunger, excuse the pun, not intended, to do anything about it, because there are so many vested interests in this that stand against it happening. The large food industry lobbies. The government are constantly thwarted by the industries because they do actually have a strong vote as well. So we can't rely on government. Their heart isn't in it. So we've got to look at other ways of doing this.
So why not the food industry then? Do they not feed us the food that we need?
Yes.
She said provocatively.
It's funny, isn't it? Because for me, obviously, when I was younger, it's kind of, let's say a packet of cereal, you look at a packet of cereal and it would tell you that it's got all the vitamins and minerals to keep you healthy. It's going to make you keep you full of energy, this, that, and the other. You actually believe really everything it says. And we're a little bit wiser to that now when we know that it's actually just marketing speak, and that a lot of cereals, in fact, most cereals, anything that's in a packet on the shelf is going to have either too much sugar, it's going to have refined whole grains that basically don't really have any great nutrition because it's been stripped out of it. Any nutrition that these cereals do have has been added back in because it's actually been taken out.
So, and they're not all added back in because the food industry doesn't know what nature knows, and they're not all added back in. It's not complete.
We've got very strong industries that are lobbying, as I say, like the dairy industry, the meat industry, the fishing industry. They've all got their fingers in the pie or thumbs in the pie, uh, whatever. And so we can't really trust it. We've actually got to strip things back to the basics to actually get any real sense from this.
And there's another category of people who you imagine would care for you, almost certainly do care for you, are doing a fantastic job at the moment, but also are not reliable sources of the right sort of information with regard to food, and that's the medical profession. And this is the one that's most difficult to overcome. And I think it's one of the reasons that we struggle so much with belief about how potent food can be as medicine. And that's because they simply do not have that kind of nutritional education. It's again, I guess it started before the 1950s, but it seemed to probably the early part of the century that there was a lot of focus on medication. I mean, once we discovered antibiotics, wow, they were spectacular, and there was a real hunger, we're using that again, to try and find more medication that would solve more problems in a similar way. And really, I'm not sure we've had anything quite as spectacular as antibiotics since, for want of trying. And for lifestyle conditions, medications will only address symptoms. They will never, certainly not prevent, and they will definitely not reverse the disease either. So when we're looking at heart disease, these are the big ones in Britain and certainly in the Western world. Heart disease, diabetes, and certain types of cancer, they can all be prevented, and some of them can even be reversed with the right kind of diet. And unfortunately, you will not get this advice from most doctors. And if you do, you've got to treasure keep him or her. This was kind of your experience in a way, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So some of you who are watching this may know me from it, for a long period of time. Others won't have met me until after I changed things. But I struggled most of my life, certainly from the age of probably early teens up to my late 40s with being overweight, and to a point where I was actually significantly overweight, around about 18 stone back in 2008, 2009. And it was beginning to take its toll on me in terms of certain health conditions, blood pressure, etc. And I realized I needed to do something about this. And the doctors at the time were telling me that, it was about diet, but really you need to be on medication for your blood pressure. You need to be on statins for your cholesterol. It was pretty I didn't know where to turn, because I thought they're telling me about healthy eating, but they're actually not advising how that is. They give you the leaflets which say about, a balanced diet, but basically the leaflets you give, exactly, the leaflets that they give you are based on the kind of outdated food pyramid, which to us is kind of not really relevant anymore.
And seems, to be honest, to have a little bit of a pandering to some of the food industry, we've noticed.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't know how to go about it. So what I started doing at that time was I used to go shopping to the supermarket, and I'd buy my low-fat yogurts, my low-fat hummus. I get like celery sticks to dip into the hummus and things like that. And essentially I was beginning to kind of like just completely starve myself in the hope that I would lose weight, and that would be it. But of course that isn't sustainable over time, because we get bored with that. And also you're eating essentially with things like I mentioned, the low-fat hummus. If you're buying that in a pack, it's usually got some nasty things in as well, and it wasn't really the way to go. So what changed for me? What was I able to do? Because now I'm actually I have actually been able to lose weight, and I've actually held my weight down to about 11 stone for the last few years. So I've come off my medication. So it's been a real journey for me, and I still find it quite hard to believe I was able to do it. And actually, not being funny about it, but it was never a struggle to lose the weight. I found I happened on something that worked for me, and I think I've got the secret here, and I want to shout out about it sometimes. But of course, everyone's different. But what was it? What happened to me? Annette came along. I met Annette again after we'd met as students in our late teens, early 20s in Germany. We re-met, and we got together. Annette was eating a very a very much more healthy diet than I was at the time, and it was based on something that she'd evolved to eating like that because she had a certain condition, endometriosis, which she managed to resolve through diet. She did the research, she followed it more or less to the letter, and it worked for her. And because I'm pretty much fairly easygoing when it comes to just changing things, I just aligned myself really to the way that Annette was eating. And Annette's also always been a pretty active person. She walks a lot, so I was eating a lot more healthily. I was walking more regularly, and incredibly, I just saw my weight start to drop. And I was not actually starving myself. I was never on a diet. I was eating great foods, but whole foods mainly. Lots of salads, lots of vegetables. I eventually cut out dairy. Annette had already cut that out. That was one of the factors that helped her to resolve endometriosis. We cut down, well, Annette was hardly eating any animal foods at the time. I cut down my animal foods as well, so meat, etc. And we kept eating fish a little bit, but we both then evolved and transitioned onto a plant strong diet. And so now we don't have any dairy, we don't eat any meat or fish, so it's now all plant based, and we've kind of both moved on from that, and we found that we've got loads of energy. It's really worked for us, and we love it.
We know too that it's worked in studies, small studies that have been done, but better still than that with the population studies.
Yeah, do you want to say a little bit more about that, or shall I say something about that?
Yeah, could do. Yeah, there have been studies done, primarily the ones we know about in America, but in other places too, on heart disease and on diabetes, with successful reversal of not just symptoms, but sometimes the whole disease outcomes. But the thing that really excites us the most is, the thing that it excites us particularly is the population studies in what we've referred to before, the blue zones in particular, but not exclusively. We've come across other ones as well, other little pockets in the world where people live well to an old age, so beyond 100 in some cases, and more so than most of the rest of the population. But they live healthily. The heart disease is minimal, as is diabetes and the cancers. And in terms, there are lots of factors. There's movement and so on. There's less stress, though there are plenty of factors. But in terms of food, which is almost certainly the biggest factor, they have nothing in common apart from the fact that they eat natural food. Whatever food is naturally available to them, that's what they eat. And that seems to be the answer. It really is pretty simple. And so that was really all I wanted to add into that. Was there anything more?
No, I think that covers it really. So really, we're not about promoting a lifestyle here. We're not. There's no kind of financial gain for us.
No, we've nothing to sell you.
Yeah, we're not promoting a product. We just really want to be completely honest and sincere with everyone about what works for us, and we want to inspire others to become more conscious about what they eat. About more educated about what it really means to eat food that supports us.
The education is still key, unfortunately, isn't it? And it would seem really nice to just naturally go with what your body wants, but we've become so far removed from that the body isn't able to do that so easily anymore.
And it's also not just about like eating in a way that maintains the absence of disease. It's about actually more than that. It's about actually enhancing how you feel, about being really well. And I mean, we're touch wood, we think we're in pretty reasonable health at the moment, and we have lots of energy, and it works for us. And I think it can work for anyone if they're prepared to make the changes. So where do we start?
We would start by the recommendation we would give is to pull back as much as possible from the processed foods, especially the ultra processed foods. They're the ones that they're fairly addictive. That's the plan of the industry. They're going to make money out of you if you keep wanting to come back and have more. If you can pull away from them and just keep including more of the whole foods, the things that don't come in they might be wrapped, admittedly, but they don't come in packets. They're the things to look out for. So fruits and vegetables are obvious. They are whole foods, and the more you can eat of them, the better. And most people tend to like fruit. That's a good place to start. Expand that a little bit. We found as well that if you can get creative with salads, then the typical idea of a salad must be a few limp leaves of lettuce, a bit of cucumber, and tomato. That's completely inadequate. There's so much more you can do with a salad. Can be any colour, and it can be really vibrant and crunchy and have all sorts of textures and tastes in it. It's up to you, but it's a very, very easy way to eat a lot of vegetables, possibly daily. If you can do salads at least once a day, that would be a really good start. And especially if you have a little bit more time now, because that point where you're having to accommodate something new, that's when the time is taken up. And we know that that's the case. We've been through that too. But if you have a little bit more time, make the most of it now and put in some new habits. You get faster and more creative, and things get better as you go along, I think. Is that
yes, it definitely. I mean, we've evolved so much as well, because we've learned as we've gone along. Yeah. And we 3-4 years ago, we realized that what we thought was right then was we've had to make changes to that as well. So it's actually a constant journey of discovery in a way. But it's also it's exciting.
It's very
believe
exciting.
me, it can be exciting.
Yeah.
The other thing as well is that I think one of the challenges for people when they're changing from a particular way of eating to another way of eating is you often can't imagine life without your favourite food. So for some people, it may be cheese, for example. For me, it was definitely cheese, and also I used to enjoy red wine. Now, I'm not saying to anyone that, oh no, you can't drink red wine anymore. You absolutely can't eat cheese. But what I'm saying is that if you do want to try and eliminate certain things that you find really, really kind of that you crave, over time, you actually your taste buds change once you're no longer eating them anymore or drinking them anymore. Your tastes change to a point where now, for example, I don't even fancy the idea of drinking red wine. And I certainly don't miss cheese, and there's other foods we now eat that I feel actually I do crave, and whole foods, fresh fruit, for example, vegetables. So I think it just takes a little while sometimes for your the pathways in your brain to kind of change. Like any habits, you've got to break old habits and develop new pathways in your brain. It does happen, believe me, and life doesn't have to kind of be miserable. It can be actually exciting. And I think for us, our health is so important to us and the way we eat that every day we get excited about the food we eat. So we just want to share that excitement with you.
Yeah, we do. And I think it's worth adding that because we've been so keen to really get to grips with this fully, we're doing a very detailed and really quite intensive course at the moment, which is absolutely excellent, with two of the best plant-based educators globally. They're based in the United States, and it's providing us with more information than we could have ever dreamed of, that they've been able to put together quite uniquely. And for that reason, we know that the real value of education, and we would urge you to really take some time out and educate yourself. You are your most important project. There is nothing more important than looking after yourself, and all that then extends to all the people who love you, who depend on you. It's so well worth doing. And if you're able to keep yourself well, or even make yourself a little bit better, other people see that, and you become an education for them just by virtue of the fact that you're doing it. And so we strongly recommend that you get educated, so you don't get into that situation of having an imbalance of things that create the kind of, well, that prompt the idea that, oh, this doesn't work, I should go back to how it used to be, because that's a real disappointment when you're probably so close and all it needs is a little shift. So education, unfortunately, we need it. We're not as natural as we used to be, and we need now the education to get back to something that's really going to serve us well. So does that?
Yeah, I think that more or less covers it. Yeah. So apologies if it's the video is rather long. We do try to keep them short, and sometimes we just get a little bit carried away with our excitement.
Yeah, so, and we're really happy to hear from anybody if you want to get in touch for any kind of resources for education or whatever, books, whatever, anything like that.
Yeah, and also people can email us as well at our email address
Yeah.
if they want more information.
Well, that'll be at the top of your. That's at the top of your Facebook, and it's the top of the
Yeah.
Henry and Henry Facebook
Yeah.
page as well. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.